Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the News channel. So in this video, I am continuing chapter 1 of economic survey. This is class number 3 of economic survey 2025. So let me go for a quick recap what we have discussed in my previous video the other day. I started discussing about the concepts of how global uncertainty is having some impact on Indian economy. So more or less, the beginning of every economic survey carries the same thing. What is the global scenario? How macroeconomic fundamentals are present at the global level? What are the global uncertainties that was there in the past year and that was expected in the upcoming years? And collaboratively, how they are going to impact Indian economy? That is what they will be discussing in the first chapter. Subsequently, they will be going to the fifth chapter where they will be discussing about some themes. This year's theme is how to ensure that the private sector should be given a free hand in the country almost in each and every field. Be it the so-called deregulation of agriculture, be it the so-called deregulation of industries, service sector, or the so-called the non-formal sectors which are arising in the country in the form of gig economy. So these are the things that was discussed in the fifth chapter based on the thematic lines of this survey. So let's go for the place where we have stopped. In my last video, I started discussing what are the global uncertainties that the world has faced, particularly in the last 1 year, and subsequently what the world is going to see in the upcoming years. If we look at that segment, let's start with that. So we have seen that in the last 1 year, the global economy started reviving after post-pandemic levels, or we have reached to the pre-pandemic levels. And if you classify how the world economy is going on, advanced economies are performing a bit low compared to the emerging market and developing economies. In the advanced economies, America is dominating the economy compared to the European economies. Second thing is the inflation at all the world level, it started coming down, and notable worthy has come down, or notable level of downfall in the inflation can be seen in the advanced economies, where the inflation was staggering around 2% of the general growth. But when you come to the emerging markets, the inflation levels in the country has substantially been somewhere around 6 to 8%. It was topped by Mexico, followed by India. One outliner to this inflation was China, which is going in the deflationary trend. And this is one challenge for China that we have to see, or we have solved. Next one is coming to the so-called how manufacturing sector is performing and how service sector is performing. For that, we have Purchasers Managers Index. By the way, the Purchasers Managers Index is very clear that the industrial sector is having somewhere around some contracting point, or it is clocking somewhere around 49 to 50 score in the Purchasing Managers Index. But when you come to the service sector, it is somewhere around 52 to 53%. So service sector is dominating compared to the industrial sector. This is the next observation that we have seen. And when it comes to the so-called shipping transportation, right, the transportation cost has slightly decreased compared to the previous years. We have Shanghai Cooperation Index, we have Baltic Dry Index. These two indices, those Shanghai Cooperation or Shanghai Index is at a very high pace. If you come to the Baltic Dry Index, it is going at a low pace. This is some substantial thing that we have to note here. However, one problem that we may face is again the re-emergence of Israel-Palestine conflict may create challenges in the Suez Canal, which is going to create a challenge to the global trade, particularly the trade which is linked with Atlantic Ocean towards the Indian Ocean, towards that Mediterranean, and through the Suez Gulf we have to enter into Indian Ocean, by the way. That is one problem that the world might face in the upcoming days. However, Donald Trump is very clear that he wanted to stop that war, and that is a meeting that has taken place between the premiers of Israel as well as America. When it comes to the so-called the global uncertainties are the continuation of the war in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. The second one is increasing cyber threats is one problem that the world is seeing. The third one is emerging climate threat is another thing that the globe has to deal collectively and cooperatively. The fourth one is some tendencies of protectionism which was started in America that may have some ripple effects across the world. This is something that the world may face, and these are the circumstances which might be challenging the global level. So overall, in essence, the world has come to pre-pandemic developments. In this, emerging markets and developing economies are dominating. Third one is in the advanced economies, America is dominating. solar service sector is dominating compared to the so-called manufacturing sector, and more or less the scale of growth in the shipping industry has been substantial, and the prices have fallen down substantially. This is some good developments that has happened. In this outline, what is India's progress? That is what we have to discuss. This was discussed in the second part of the economic survey, chapter number 1. So I am going to start from that angle in this discussion. So let's start with the so-called GDP. So what we have to discuss, macroeconomic parameters. That is what we have seen. First one is how GDP is visualized by economic survey for the past year, that is financial year 25. Second one is how it is going to be for the upcoming year. Next one is what is the contributors for this GDP. We all know that national income is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. How each term is performing, that is the second option. Third one is how inflation levels are there in the country. Fourth one is how particular sector is working, be it agriculture, industries and service sector. What is economic service opinion on that? Next one is financial sector performance. In the financial sector, we have banks, we have stock markets, we have insurance sector, and we have pensions. How they are performing, we have to have a look at that. They have shed a part of light on that also. We'll just quickly go through it and then we will come across something like what are the price levels in the country. That is another point that we have to discuss. And most importantly, the thing that is very important for the youth of this country, what about the workforce or workers population ratio in the country, labor force participation rate in the country, and what economic survey is speaking about the unemployment. So this is the thing that is left in the first chapter as far as the economic survey is considered. And along with this, they have also discussed with one more thing. They have compared in some segments where how our performance was there before 2019 arrival of COVID pandemic, and what is the achievements of the country, whether we have went back or not. These are the things that they have discussed. To start with, the economic survey is very optimistic about Indian economy. Amidst the global circumstances or global challenges that we have discussed just now, economic survey is infusing confidence in the people of the country, saying that the growth rate of the financial year 2025 may be somewhere around 6.4% of GDP. Substantially for the upcoming year, it is expecting to grow at 6.3 to 6.8%. This is what economic survey is speaking. So this financial year expectation is 6.4%. Coming to the agricultural sector, thanks to the good monsoons that we have seen this year, compared to the last year, which was an El Nino season, this year there was good amount of rainfall. As a result, the production in agriculture has substantially increased, and there has been record production of food grains in the Kharif season that we have just come up across. So that is one great thing in agriculture. Thanks to this Kharif production, the total agricultural sector growth in the country has substantially recorded 3.8% of growth rate. This was on an average greater than the last 10 years growth. So agriculture sector is positioned in a very good point at this point of time, thanks to the rainfall that we have seen and thanks to the God. Right. Next one is, third thing is the so-called industries. Industrial sector growth is again coming back into the momentum according to the survey, and they are expecting that in this financial year, industrial growth rate will be somewhere around 6.2%. That is what they are expecting. As far as service sector is considered, as global service sector is dominating, Indian service sector will also be dominating. And that is one observation that they have done. And service sector has the potential to grow somewhere around 10% of GDP in this year. Coming to the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic comparisons, in almost all the sectors, except in some sectors of service, India has achieved pre-pandemic growth rate. This is one substantial achievement that India has seen. What are the sectors where we have seen the K-shaped recovery, or the recovery is not in line with the so-called other sectors? These are those sectors which have mass contacts during the times of COVID, such as the tourism, the hospital industry, hospitalization or hospitalities, entertainment industries, transportation industries. These are the sectors which are still struggling in the service sector to come and perform to an expected level. Apart from that, all the other sectors, be it the agriculture, industries and other parts of service sector, everything has achieved to the pre-pandemic levels, which means now India has completely come out of the so-called pandemic impacts and we are going in a very bright path or we have recovered to the path of pre-COVID levels. This is what this, some observation that they are doing. And this is not the first observation that they have done. They have done the same observation in the last year economic survey, which was presented in June 2024. What about other parameters? Coming to the fiscal developments of the country, the survey is very optimistic about the banking sector in India, and thanks to various reforms that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his government has taken up, banking sector in India has become quite healthy compared to the global banks. Why? The gross NPAs in the country and the net NPAs in the country has substantially decreased. At one point of time in the year 2018, banks in India were facing highest NPA crisis. Today it has become so low that we have reached the bottom level of the last 12 years. So the gross NPAs were to the bottom of last 12 years, somewhere around 2.5% of the total loans that they have extended, and the net NPAs were substantially low than 0.5. What is the difference between gross and net? Those students who are following economics, they might be knowing gross NPAs is the total NPAs of a bank, net NPAs is gross NPAs minus the provisioning amount that the banks are keeping aside in order to meet the impacts of respective bad loans. Right. This is one performance, and the survey has been very positive on the lines of return on equity that the banks are getting, return on the assets that they are getting, and the profits that the banks have made. Almost all commercial banks, scheduled commercial banks, have performed beautifully in terms of the so-called the output that they have shown in returns. So banking sector was positioned in a very good point. When it comes to the credit that the banks are giving, credit is one of the most important things on which the so-called private final consumption or private expenditure is going to depend on, private investments are going to depend on. So here what economic survey is saying is we had seen the highest credit cycle after COVID-19. In the next year, maybe it might substantially fall in order to meet the so-called the deposit rates. And survey has made a substantial agreement or substantial remark saying that whenever a bank is giving credit, the credit cycle will be somewhat higher compared to the so-called debit cycle. What do I mean by that? The credit to growth will be substantially increased than the so-called the deposit rate. So over a period of time, it takes almost 40 months so that the deposit rates will be equalizing to the so-called credit dispersal rate. As a result, now we have reached that peak. Maybe in the upcoming days, this might substantially decrease compared to the so-called deposit rates to equalize this. However, survey is optimistic that as private people are coming forward, this credit might still go up. This is one thing that they are focusing. And most importantly, as far as the private individuals is considered, what survey has focused is, in the banks, the emerging crisis that the banks are going to face is the credit that the banks are giving through unsecured loans. Now, what is this unsecured loans, unsecured loans? If I am going to a bank to ask some home loan, they will ask me to keep some security. Obviously, the home that I am going to purchase, I'll keep that as security and I will get it, and that security is called home security or home loans. On the other hand, think this, when I am going to fill petrol at the petrol filling station, they will be giving me a credit card. They will be asking, sir, whether you want a credit card or not. Say that I have applied for the credit card and they have given me it. And I can go and use that credit. Credit means indirectly they are giving me loans. What security I have kept? I have not kept any security. So this type of credit culture has increased in the country, and majority of the people are taking loans through these credit cards. And that is where the banks are facing the next crisis. That is what economic service observation is. Majority of the banks have been exposed to these unsecured loans in the form of the credit cards than the personal loans that they have taken from the so-called by keeping an asset. If you have kept an asset, that is completely good. As we have not kept anything in the credit cards, that is one problem that survey highlights. And recently, what RBI has passed some recommendations to all the banks saying that whichever bank has highest unsecured loans, they have to maintain additional capital reserves aside to meet the so-called emergency crisis that may arise in the upcoming days. So survey was very cautious on this. Except this, the banking sector of India is completely good. As far as insurance sector is concerned, in the budget itself, I have said that this year for insurance, foreign direct investments was allowed 100%, and that is one great momentum that may carry in the upcoming days. Even in the pension sector, we have seen that last year the government of India has changed the pensions. As a result, this year it may continue the same. So this is about financial sector. There has been a robust financial developments in the country as far as the banks is considered. When it comes to the capital market, again there are 2 or 3 beautiful observations that survey has done. Particularly the first thing is foreign direct investments in the country are coming, but when you look at the foreign portfolio investments that is coming into the stock market, they have been reduced substantially. Rather than investing, people are taking their money back and they are going back to their home countries due to the so-called majority of the multilateral institutions or majority of the so-called MNCs and TNCs. They have started going for buyback offers, or they started something called IPOs in their country. As a result, they are going directly and investing there. This has made the FPIs to leave the country. That is the reason if you do observe the stock markets in the last 2 to 3 months, there has been many troubles in the stock market of India because there has been price asset bubble, and that is being bursted now. So that is one area where survey is cautioning the regulators such as SEBI to take care of it, and SEBI is also directing all the investors to be careful of it. So this is one point as far as stock markets are considered. Otherwise, what survey says is, as people are getting more and more money into their hands, rather than going and keeping it in the productive sectors, they are coming and keeping it in the stock market, they are keeping it in the banks, which is creating some bubble here. So what is that thing? Rather than keeping the money in the financial assets, if I in some actual investments I am going to keep in the financial segment, then that is called financialization, and financialization is the term that we have to remember. So what is financialization? Take for example, I am earning some 3 lakhs per month. Normally what I can do, I can take this 3 lakhs and I can invest in some industry. Say if I wanted to start my own industry, something like a textile industry, then what I can do, I can go on, I can keep it. If I start textile industry with my 3 lakh rupees, what I can do, I can give some employment, I can generate some output called textiles, and then I can give some productive output to the economy. But if I take this 3 lakhs and if I go and invest in the stock market, I will be expecting that when this stock will rise and when I can get the profit. So this is called financialization. Rather than keeping my money in this segment, I will be going and I will be keeping it that side. So financialization can be, for those who are writing UPSC, you can go with, this is a negative term, right? Just remember that this is a negative term. Whatever the options that will be there in the negative options that will be there in the choices, you can eliminate them. So this is about stock market, ladies and gentlemen, that we have as far as the survey is considered. So financial sector is this. Next, going to the so-called, as I said, GDP, financial sector, banks, how they have performed. Agriculture sector, how it is performing, industrial sector, how it is performing. The next thing that we will speak is about the so-called inflation trends in the country, how inflation is varying in the country, and how what is the survey's concept here. Now we all know that this inflation that we are targeting in India is CPI, all India, headline inflation. Headline inflation means it is an inflation of the entire basket of commodities, be it core plus the so-called volatile items. So what economic survey points out is, if you look at the core inflation, the inflation in non-volatile products, more or less it is stable and it has substantially decreased. But headline inflation has been a bit higher, which is somewhere around more than 6% itself. So why there is increase in headline inflation? Obviously due to the food prices in the country. So majority of the times RBI has tried to maintain it within 2 to 6% band, but at times what we have achieved is we have went a step beyond 6%, and that is what the point which is stopping the country in the monetary policy also. So if you look at the monetary policy in the last almost 18 months, what Government of India has done, Government of India has substantially maintained, RBI has substantially maintained the same policy rates in the country, somewhere around 6.25% or 6.3%. This month, 2 days back, they have reduced it after almost 18 months. This is what the next observation as far as inflation is considered. Core inflation is stable, higher food prices inflation. As a result, the total retail inflation in the country is very high than the target that the RBI has set, Government of India has set for RBI, that is 2 to 6% of the band. We have crossed it. This is the thing. Coming to the external sector, in the external sector, what we will have is what are the exports, what are the imports. and what is our current account deficit, what is capital account side, and what is the total balance of payments, and what is forex reserves. This is what we have in short as far as external sector is considered. Coming to the export segment, what survey observes is India is exporting petroleum products and non-petroleum products. That is a well-known fact. As far as petroleum products are considered, the total amount of exports has decreased. But when it comes to the non-petroleum products, the value of exports has increased. The second thing is, compared to the so-called industrial output or manufacturing sector exports, service sector exports have dominated, and that is what quite common to this country being a service-based economy. So this year also we have seen more or less the same thing. But the imports of petroleum products have substantially increased in the country. As a result, as far as merchandise trade is considered, that is in the deficit segment. But one thing that we can observe in the current account side is the remittances. India has been the world's largest remittance recipient according to the World Bank data. So World Bank gives global remittances report. In that report, even in this year, India is the largest country, or India is the highest country. India is the country to receive highest amount of remittances. What is remittances? The money that is earned by your citizens that is sent back to your country. That is called a remittance. So India is the largest recipient of our remittances. That shows the diasporic strength of India, by the way. So remittances has been positive. As a result, the overall current account deficit, which has to be a bit high due to the merchandise trade deficit, this was reduced due to the positive global remittances. This is about current account segment. Even this year, current account is in the deficit segment. But come to the capital account segment. When you come to the capital account segment, what we will have? We will have foreign direct investments, we have foreign portfolio investments, we have government borrowings, by the way. And you have small deposits of FCNR, leave about FCNR. Look at these three components. Foreign direct investments. Survey has pointed out that foreign direct investments in the country has increased in the last year, and that is the thing that we can expect in the upcoming days. So that is one beauty as far as foreign direct investments are considered. But when you look at the so-called foreign portfolio investments, just now I said that they are leaving the country in as majority of the countries or majority of the companies started buybacking offers, or they are initiating something like they have created IPO offers. So these things they are doing, as a result they are disinvesting from the country. But when it comes to the borrowings of the government has borrowed by issuing government securities. Substantially we have got good amount of government securities were sold outside. As a result we got good amount of loans. All this has contributed for the rise in the capital account segment. If you take the net of capital account and current account, that is called balance of payment. In the balance of payment, it was positive again for the country, thanks to the so-called the FDIs and the so-called government securities loans that we have received. So overall, balance of payments is positive for the country. Obviously, we know when the balance of payment is positive, what we will do, we will go and we will extract that excess foreign currencies which are coming into the market. And this is called sterilization function of RBI. RBI has to step in, it has to take away that excess dollars, keep it in the reserves which is available with RBI, and that is called forex reserves of the country. So the forex reserves of the country in the last financial year has substantially increased, and today we have around 630 billions of forex reserves. It is meeting 90%. It covers 90% of all our external debt, and it will cover an import cover of almost 10 months. This is what the strength of our forex reserves is. Again, on the so-called external sector, we are doing it beautifully. When it comes to the so-called employment sector, survey points out that the formal employment has substantially increased between 2018 and 2022, which can be pointed out to the so-called EPFO records. The second thing that we can observe is the unemployment rate in the country has substantially decreased post-COVID-19, which was there at 3.2% this year, according to PLFS survey of NSSO. And substantially, we have seen something like the workers' population ratio in the country is somewhere around 58%. And at the same time, what we observe is, that the labor force participation rate in the country has increased to 60%. So this is what economic survey speaks about Indian economy. And what is the way forward? The way forward is quite optimistic as far as these macroeconomic fundamentals are considered. There are global uncertainties. We have to be very cautious about it. We have to spur the domestic demand in order to increase the production activities because the global demand is dampening. Government of India has to make people ready to embrace the artificial intelligence, which is still in the infancy stage. That is what survey states. So this is the time that every Indian is given training by establishing some centers of excellence in artificial intelligence, so that this is infancy stage. Just like in 1990s when software industry was started coming into the global economy, our Indians has captured it. As a result, our sector has propelled from agriculture to service sector altogether. As artificial intelligence is at the infancy stage, this is the time for Indians to go and learn that skill. For that, Government of India has to develop centers of excellence in artificial intelligence for learning, and with that, our youth will be ready to embrace the changes that are going to happen in the world. Through this, we can be ready for the so-called facing any global uncertainties that may arise in the upcoming days. This is what economic survey says about in the first chapter, after discussing at the so-called global uncertainties. Overall, what is the summary? The summary is India is positioned in a very good point at this point, is positioned at a very good phenomena, or all the things that are happening in India is quite optimistic. We are in a good position, and as we move to 2047 Viksit Bharat, at this point of time, economic survey hopes that everything is good. Let's go for a quick recap about all these things in the form of the so-called. I would like to show whatever we have discussed here through the concepts of the survey itself. So those who are looking for the PDF, you can download this PDF by going to my Telegram channel, which is given in the description box. So let's have a look at this. So what is the performance levels of the country? So this is the continuation point. This is the class where I have to start. The GDP for financial year 2025 as expected by survey is 6.4%. Agriculture sector is going at 3.8%. Industrial sector is 6.2%. This is all for the financial year 2025. And for 2026, survey expects that the economy can be growing at 6.3 to 6.8%. So what is this? So this is what they have said. Despite the global uncertainties, India economy is going to be in a very good position. Look at all the sectors: agriculture sector, industrial sector, service sector. They are performing beautifully well. And the one that is there in the green color is financial 25. On the green, blue, yellow one is the 10-year average between financial year 2015 and 24, excluding 21 and 22. So what we are bothered is, we are bothered about the green one. Look at this. This is going at somewhere around 3.8%. We can say this. Industrial sector is growing at 6.2% something. And service sector, however, it is somewhere around 7%. The total GVA is clocking or looking at supply side of economics. So the total GVA of the country has been growing substantially well, and GDP is also very well at 6.4%. This is what economic services. So every parameter is quite good compared to last financial year. Now if you look at the recovery, how economy has recovered in each and every sector. So if you consider that this is the pre-pandemic trend, whatever that was given in the black color in the dotted lines, that was pre-pandemic levels. So more or less the aggregate GVA started recovering here. Agriculture started recovering to the pre-pandemic levels. And then if you look at the industrial sector is started going back with the pre-pandemic levels, and service sector is quite less than the pre-pandemic levels, but this is also expected to grow in the upcoming days. When it comes to the construction sector, this is one thing that we can see. But personally, the deseasonalized construction and deseasonalized manufacturing. So if we look at the so-called construction sector, we have seen substantial growth. We have crossed the pre-pandemic levels. And if you look at the construction segment is one segment which is dampening in the country. This is the thing that I said as K-shaped recovery. Some economies or some sectors are growing, some sectors are falling. So what do I mean by that? Industrial sector, agricultural sector, service sector is going good. The total supply side of the economy that is measured in GVA is also quite good, more than 6%, and GDP is somewhere around 6.4%. And almost all the sectors have been recovered very good. But when you look at the service sector, then there has been some disturbances in the service sector, particularly the trade, tourism, hospitality, next. As such, these customer services businesses are decreasing, whereas the so-called finance, real estate, something like processed foods. All these service sectors have been increasing and they have been performing decently well. That is what they said. Again, we see a K-shaped recovery in this growth. That is what we have to remember. There is K-shaped recovery as far as service sector is considered. Now, when we go for the so-called global slowdown in the manufacturing sector, already we have seen the PMI. Manufacturing is bit 56.5% in the country. This is something good for the country. Even though globe has went into a low phase in the manufacturing, India has performed decently well. Who gives Purchases Managers Index? HSBC India. Now, improvement in business expectations. Overall business situation in the country overall has increased substantially. So this is a good indicator of business in the country. They will not ask all this. So business improvements have been happening. The next one is GDP growth rate. Just now, whatever I discussed, remember that figures, that is more than enough. And we all know that how to calculate GDP through expenditure method, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. C is consumption expenditure. So what is the consumption expenditure here? Consumption expenditure is private final consumption expenditure. This is C. Investments is gross fixed capital formation. So investments is gross fixed capital formation. Government expenditure is gross government fiscal capital expenditure, exports and imports. This is how they are positioned. So more or less everything is performing good and service sector is minus. So this is also a positive for the country. So more or less this is the thing that we look, and through this they have calculating this percentage of GDP. No need to remember the numbers. Housing sales in the country has increased. Not important for us. So this is what the domestic economy remains steady amidst global uncertainties. That is what they have discussed. Subsequently, if you look at multiple fronts, sector by sector, what is the growth? Macroeconomic stability, the savings in the country has increased. Just remember, savings in the country has increased, dis-savings has reduced. Fiscal discipline, this is important. The total capital expenditure as a percentage of total expenditure has been substantially increasing from financial year 2021 to financial year 2024, where we have reached 21.4% of capital expenditure in the total expenditure of the government. Right. So this is a substantial improvement in the capital expenditure. This shows that Prime Minister Modi and his team is very serious about fiscal discipline in the country. As far as union government finances are considered, union government finances have been substantially good, be it the so-called net tax receipts, gross tax receipts, right? And then non-debt receipts, non-tax receipts. Next is tax devolution to the states, capital expenditure, and then total expenditure of the government, right? If you look at it, so there has been substantial again. The total tax devolution has been increased to the states. That is one observation that we can make in the financial year 2025. Now, when it comes to the states, a very interesting observation was made. Majority of the states are dependent on the so-called their own tax revenues have increased substantially for majority of the states. This is what the observation that this survey has done. This is first time that this type of observation done. State-owned finances, own tax revenue for the states has increased compared to the last years. And the states, central government obviously will be sending. It is also increased to 38.1%. And tax revenues for the states have increased. Own tax revenues and tax revenues from the center, substantially it has increased. So what are the own taxes of the state? State government taxes, GST, SGST, stamps and duties. The only thing that they have fallen is land revenue. In the land revenue, majority of the states have shown decrease, but in the remaining taxes, sales tax, state excise duties, other tax duties. So in all the other areas, the state governments have performed well, except land revenue. So what is this chart, guys? This is about state government revenue. So what economic survey is telling is almost all these sectors are performing well. Almost all these sectors are performing well. Next. Next one is, so whenever the state's tax revenue has been increased, then the states are performing well. That is what another observation that it is saying. These are all not important. How state governments are spending. Now, which states are keeping more on the capital expenditure? This is one thing that we have to remember. So, which states are spending more on the capital expenditure? If you look, Arunachal Pradesh is the one, followed by Sikkim, followed by Manipur. So, all India capital expenditure is 16.5 as a percentage of revenue expenditure, but Arunachal Pradesh has highest amount of capital outlay. Now, there is a positive correlation between capital expenditure and fiscal space. The more the state government spend on capital expenditure, there will be good fiscal space for the country or for the states. Now, when it comes to the inflation levels, look at this. The CPI inflation was somewhere around, normally it has to be in the country between 4 plus or minus 2%, that is 6 to 2%. And if you do observe this trend has shown that in sometimes we have crossed 6, particularly in August 2023. Then we have been within the limits, and then in October 2024 again it crossed or it touched somewhere around 6. So inflation is within the band except 1 or 2 years. Here core inflation is substantially low. Core inflation, which is in green, is substantially low. But what we observe is headline inflation or food inflation. Food inflation has dominated here. Core inflation is low. So this is one major achievement. But what we have to observe is inflation is something that we have to control. Next one is, as far as external sector is considered, in the financial year 2025, in the first 2 quarters, if you do observe, the merchandise trade balance in the country is a bit low. So already I said merchandise trade balance will be negative for the country. How much it is negative? Somewhere around minus $80 billion. When it comes to the service trade exports, so it is positive for the country. How much positive? It is somewhere around plus 40. This is minus 75. So overall we'll have current account deficit, by the way. Net to private transfers is also positive. So indirectly we are having current account balance. If you look at current account balance in the country, so current account balance is a bit negative. Current account balance is a bit negative. That is what we observe. But when it comes to the so-called gross FDIs inflows, so we see there has been substantial increase in gross FDIs. However, FDI withdrawal has also happened, that is called repatriation, means people taking their money and leaving the country. So the net FDI inflows have decreased to a bit low. Net FDI inflows have decreased a bit low. And moderation of growth in bank credit in different sectors. So more or less bank credit is also good in the country. Then it comes to the so-called banking system indicators. As I said, gross NPAs in the country as part of total loans has decreased to 12-year low, that is 2.6% is the gross NPAs of all the banks. Next one is return on equity has increased, return on asset has increased, CRR has increased. So banks in India are positive in their outlook. As far as employment indicators are considered, this is also an important segment. So the total unemployment rate in the country is 3.2%. The total workers population ratio is 58.2%. and the total labor force participation rate is 60.1. This is according to the latest PLFS survey released by NSSO or MOSPI. So statistics are presented according to usual status approach. That is through this we are calculating this one. This is what this topic is speaking. So what is important here? This is important as far as indicators. Remember, unemployment rate to 3.2. The workers population ratio in the country is 58.2. And then the total labor force participation ratio is 60.1. And this is also important. Banking sector, particularly this one, and the so-called CRAR of the banks. Next, this is okay. Bank credit is good. FDI is okay. This is not important. You can leave it. Inflation trends. So just know the trends are more or less, if you do observe the trends, what you observe, we will observe that the trends are following within the sequence. Just remember it is within the band of 2 to 6%. And then this is not that much important. You can leave it. States revenues. And then this is important. Strong fiscal discipline is followed by the government. For those who are preparing for the exam, by the way, this is all important. So this is about how the forex reserves are present, bank credit is present, employment trends are there, inflation levels are there in the country, state finances, and improving the public finance. So this is the next thing that they have discussed. So the way forward is whatever I have discussed so far, that will be the way forward. So if you want to summarize, this is the first chapter summary, guys. So global economic uncertainties are there. Global economy is recovering, so is Indian economy, and Indian economy is in a much brighter position, much better position, and much optimistic about its own performance, propelled by the demographic dividend of the country. This is about first chapter as far as economic survey is considered. There are 2 videos that I have made. You can watch it and you can use this for your answers. Thanks for joining, guys. We'll be coming out with the next chapter very soon. So like this, I'll be covering all the 13 chapters. This is first chapter of economic survey in detail analysis. Thanks. Have a great day. Wish you all the very best who are preparing for this exam.